Today we have the latest NHL trade rumors focusing on the New York Islanders, the Arizona Coyotes, the Nashville Predators, and the Vegas Golden Knights. We also have some big news from the NHL waiver wire and a entry-level contract signing with the Edmonton Oilers. All that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. Let's kick things off with the signing that was announced by the Edmonton Oilers. They've signed one of their top prospects from the 2021 NHL Draft, 6th round pick, left winger Matej Petrov, who's a Russian-born player currently playing junior hockey in the Ontario Hockey League for the North Bay Battalions. Had a really solid start to his season, averaging about a point per game, and he gets his 3-year entry-level contract. So obviously it's another left-wing prospect there for the Oilers. Hard to say exactly what his future holds at this point. He's still only 18 years old, but certainly nice to see him having a really solid year just after getting drafted. That's great progress. He'll still be eligible to play junior a little bit longer, so lots of time for him to develop before he turns pro here just yet. We also had some news from the NHL waiver wire. We have more players on waivers here today, plus we have a claim from yesterday. The Philadelphia Flyers had placed forward Nicolas Aube-Kubel on waivers, and he has been claimed. He's now heading off to be a member of the Colorado Avalanche. So the Avalanche will be able to make use of him in their bottom six. Obviously, the Avalanche have had their fair share of COVID issues and injuries like a lot of NHL teams this year. So he gets claimed and will be heading over there. And today on waivers, we have two more players. One is for the purpose of being assigned. The other is for contract termination. But the Seattle Kraken have placed veteran forward Riley Shea on waivers. So obviously, he's on a short-term, cheaper contract. You never know, maybe he could be claimed, somebody looking for a fourth-line center, but obviously things have not really worked out overly well for him with Seattle so far, and the New York Islanders have placed Leo Komarov on waivers for the purpose of contract termination, and we talked about that yesterday, that this was fully expected. There had been word that Komarov and his agent and the Islanders have mutually agreed to terminate the contract, and Leo will be heading back to play over in the KHL, and I believe he's signing a contract for probably a little bit less money. I'm not really sure of the exact terms, but either way, he'll be able to recoup some of his losses there and join a new team over in the Continental Hockey League. But that certainly will free up a decent amount of space here for the New York Islanders. Of course, we also saw them move the contract of Johnny Boychuk earlier this season as well. So that's certainly going to create some options. And the New York Islanders are not really having the start of the season that they were hoping for. I know a lot of people, myself included, predicted the New York Islanders to be one of the top teams, not only in their division, but in the entire Eastern Conference, and probably the top 4 or 5 teams that I would say have the best chance of winning the Stanley Cup based on how they performed the last few years in the playoffs and how deep they've gone. They have great goaltending. Usually they've had pretty good team defense, and the only thing they seem to be kind of missing was that extra punch in the scoring up front that they didn't quite get last year. That was kind of their downfall to make it a step further and play for the Stanley Cup. And unfortunately, Lou Lamoriello has been extremely busy, made tons of moves, navigating through their complex cap situation. But that's one piece he hasn't really been able to add as of yet. But they also have issues on the blue line, and I do expect here with this newfound cap space that we're bound to see Lou do something, I'd say, moderately significant in the near future. I mean, he may hold off and see where things go, but I don't know that the Islanders are really in a position that they should really wait. The Metropolitan Division is extremely tough. It's extremely balanced here. A lot of the teams are doing well, and in some cases even better than expected. When you look around, like teams like New Jersey, even Columbus, I think it's fair to say, is performing a little bit better than many thought. So to me, if I'm Lou Lamoriello, I'm probably not going to wait. I mean, if you look at recent articles from Arthur Staple in The Athletic addressing some options for their blue line, I mean, they obviously have a really solid pair here in Pulock and Pelech, who both recently got new contracts, and that is one of the most underrated pairs of D-men in the NHL, in my opinion. They're really, really solid. Pulock can give you a little bit of offense. He has a great shot, but they're really solid defensively in their own end, in their own right. But obviously they have a lot riding on some other players just are not really quite getting it done. I mean, you've got some older guys like Shea and Andy Green, and obviously I think they might be, kind of relied upon too much. Noah Dobson's a bright up-and-coming young defenseman who's certainly taken some steps after going as a fairly high first-round pick a few years ago, but I think it's fair to say that he's still early enough in his career that there are games that he does really well, and there are games when he looks that maybe his role is too much. So I think, obviously, that after trading Nicolas last offseason, for cap purposes, that was a big thing they had to get the cap space and to set themselves up better for expansion draft. They really didn't have a lot of choice, and they were able to do that without too much trouble. They were able to unload Jordan Eberle, who really wasn't producing as much offense as they wanted to, although he's doing well with the Kraken so far, which isn't a huge surprise. He's certainly get a different system, bigger role, and all that. But still, at the end of the day here, the Islanders need that D-man. Now, the article from The Athletic and Arthur Staples mentioned a few names. One that was kind of zoned in a little bit upon here recently was Travis Dermott of the Maple Leafs, who certainly would be available. The Leafs have been rumored to be either moving Dermott or Justin Hall, maybe one or the other. I'm not really sure that he would be the right guy, though. To me, Travis Dermott's a player that obviously Lamoriello would have some familiarity with from his time in Toronto, but at the same time, to me, Dermott's not really... I don't think he's capable of playing a solid top four role, 20 minutes a night, being a great puck mover, contributing on the power play. I personally don't see that. Anytime the Leafs have elevated his role due to injuries or whatnot, it seems like it doesn't really work out. He seems to be better in a more lower, like a third pair or more sheltered role. So I don't know if he's really the target. I mean, we've seen other reports in the past linking him to guys like maybe a Hampus Lindholm. We've seen recent reports from Mike Stevens of the Denver Post linking him to Samuel Girard as being a potential target. To me, that would make more sense. Obviously, Girard, to me, I think would be a great fit. I mean, he is extremely mobile, really terrific skater, can produce on the power play, give you that good puck-moving defenseman. Not overly big, but like I said, with the there was some criticism of his play in last year's playoffs because of how small he was. Like Vegas really took advantage and really made it life hard on him, which didn't do him any favors and really forced a lot of turnovers and kind of didn't look so good on him. But at the same time, the way the Avalanche D was built and just they were able to kind of isolate him at that point. But I think the way the Islanders are built, that might not be such an issue. I think they could shelter him a little bit better in that regard. At least you would hope so. One of those guys to me makes more sense, but the Islanders need help back there. I mean, after Pelech and Pollock, you've got Scott Mayfield, you got Noah Dobson, you got Andy Green, Zdeno Chara, and that's just not going to get it done. That's not the quality of blue line that we've seen from them in the past, and I think we're going to bound to see Lou pull off a trade here. Thankfully, they've had terrific goaltending, which is again has gone a long way to keeping them into a lot of games and giving them a chance to win. But I can only go so far. They could, like I said, they could use a scorer up front as well. It's going to be really difficult, if not impossible, for Lou to pull off both those types of moves without really shaking up the roster and having a decent amount of money go out. I know they were previously linked to Vladimir Tarasenko in the offseason. At this point, considering how strong of a start the Blues have had, I'd be surprised if St. Louis is willing to entertain it at this point. They were at one point linked to Johnny Gaudreau. Again, another player which, makes sense to some degree. But again, will Calgary do that kind of move? We haven't really heard much of anything about contract extensions for Gaudreau with the Flames. But they've, as long as they're doing well, you have to think that they don't really want to trade out one of their top offensive players. At the same time, though, they have to look for the future, and things will probably get a little bit more clear here as time goes on this season, and we'll see where teams are at a little bit closer to the deadline. Considering how things have gone for the Islanders and how much we've seen them kind of start to shuffle things around here recently, I think we're going to see Lou pull off some kind of a significant trade in the not too distant future. They also have to figure out what they're doing with Kiefer Bellows, who has stayed on the NHL roster due to the fact they figured they would lose him to waivers, but he's not really getting an opportunity either, so they have to figure out what they're going to do in that regard, and could he be used in some sort of a trade to make some upgrades as well, or at the very least, even if it's not a huge upgrade, just to kind of shake things up and find some chemistry, because a lot of their forwards just are not getting the job done. So we'll see what Lou does, but I do expect him to be busy here. We have word as well the Coyotes are working on several trades which it does not come as a huge surprise. We know like they're arguably going to be the worst team in the league this year, or at the very least the bottom couple teams. Arizona at this point has one regulation win on the season. We know that they're going to unload a few more veteran players. Apparently there is more conversations going on around guys like Phil Kessel, as well as Antoine Roussel and Johan Larsson. All players are certainly available with little term left on our contract. In the case of Phil Kessel, his actual salary is only $1 million this year, so the only problem is his cap hit, obviously. But in some degree, I think we could find a possible new home for at least a few of these guys. Apparently, there's been a little bit more talk on Larsson and Roussel than Kessel, just because their cap hit is a lot lower. But they're working on moving any and all of these guys. I don't expect any of them to be wearing a Coyotes uniform by season's end. We can't really link them at this point to any specific teams. Just that, Bill Armstrong is certainly working the phones and trying to find new homes for these guys. We know that Phil Kessel actually had requested a trade before the season started, and they were not able to find a deal that made sense, that was really able to work. There was only mild interest in the player. There wasn't as much as you would think, given his history and how many Stanley Cups he has, how many goals he's scored in the past, all that kind of stuff. But clearly we'll see where things go. Teams kind of start to identify needs and have to go out and find some options here as the season goes along. Another update on Filip Forsberg with the Nashville Predators. Has been reported that contract extension talks with the organization is expected to start here soon. There's been some talk that he very well could end up on the trade market as one of the top forwards available at the deadline, and that very well remains a strong possibility. At this point, like I said, many believe that he's looking for $8+ million, given the other contracts on this team and how he fits and where the kind of role he plays and his offensive capabilities compared to guys like Duchesne and Johansson, etc. on the team, making that kind of money already. So if he doesn't want to take less than $8 million, Pierre LeBrun reported the other day that he feels it's a pretty good chance that David Poile is not going to want to have another contract for that kind of money on the team. So unless he's willing to sign something a little bit closer to like $7 million, it's a pretty good possibility that we're going to see Filip Forsberg on the trade market near the deadline, assuming the Predators are not really considered that strong of a playoff team. And I think as the year goes on, I'd be surprised if they're able to hold that kind of a position in the standings, but only time will tell. We'll have to wait and see. But Filip Forsberg, extension talks are starting, so we should have a clearer indication probably over the next few weeks where things are going in those regards with those talks. And if they are getting closer to a deal, then it might be a player that's off the market. And if things are not going well and they're far apart, then it certainly increases the odds of seeing a trade. Now, when it comes to the Columbus Blue Jackets, of course, Aaron Portzline is reporting that, of course, like we talked about before, that Jonas Korpisalo, almost a given, will be traded, possibly even before Christmas, depending on how the offers come forth. But clearly, Elvis Merzlikins is the starting goaltender of the present and the future with his club, given the contract, and fair to say how well he's played as well. And Korpisalo is certainly going to draw attention from around the league. There's a variety of teams that need goaltending, some looking to make upgrades going for playoff spots, and some that are more like bottom dwellers but need a more quality NHL goaltender to kind of keep them in the mix. So we'll have to see where this goes, but Korpisalo is one name to watch. But a couple other names he recently brought up here that he's unsure of for the future. Doesn't mean they will be traded, but at the same time he feels is possible would be Patrick Laine and Jake Voracek. Now he feels if Laine continues to play well, at this point he's a point per game this season, but has recently missed time due to injury. If Laine is having a more solid year and shows he can be a 35-40 goal guy or plus like he has been in the past, then it doesn't really make sense for the Jackets to trade him. But obviously we know last year wasn't great for Laine, and if this year doesn't really turn out to be a whole lot better, given the fact that he's a pending restricted free agent and needs yet another contract, then it very well could be another move for Laine. But it's difficult to say. That's certainly less likely. I think there's a better chance that he continues to play well and probably ends up signing an extension, but hard to say exactly what kind of term we're looking at in that regard. But in regards to Jake Voracek, it's an interesting name, given the fact that he makes over $8 million and still has a couple years of term left on his contract. Now, when they traded Cam Atkinson for Voracek. They made a similar amount of money, except the fact that Voracek had a little bit more term. Even though that was a fairly surprising one-for-one deal, at the same time, we know that Jake Voracek has no trade protection in his contract. So if there is interest and the Jackets want to make a move, it certainly would be something that we might not be too shocked to see. I mean, he's played relatively well so far. He's yet to score, but he does have 11 assists in 11 games. He's always been more of a playmaking winger. He's a guy who can probably score you 20, 25 goals, but end up notching up anywhere from, 40 to 60 assists. Like, he's been a pretty solid 60, 70, 80 point player in the past. So there's no reason to think that a team wouldn't have interest in his playmaking abilities. But one thing that would scare them off would be the contract. If he was in the final year of his deal and Columbus could retain a little bit of money or get a decent return, then it'd be a more likely possibility. But given the fact that, he wasn't thrilled about being a Blue Jacket, at least you wouldn't think, because I know when he was traded to Philly, he didn't have a lot of good things to say about his time with Columbus. I would think that he probably wasn't super thrilled to go back, but so far things seem to be working out. I wouldn't think he'd be totally upset to be traded again, but I guess we'll see where it goes if there's going to be interest. Portsline just mentioned in the article that the future of both these players is not really clear, and we'll have to wait to see how things go later into the season to see where it goes, but it is a possibility he felt that both players could end up on the block before the trade deadline and possibly find themselves in a new home here yet again. So some potential names just to keep an eye on their situations as they evolve throughout the season. Let's see where things go. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Make sure you let me know your comments down below to let me know your thoughts on all the news discussed here today so we can discuss further in the comment section. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.